Jesus led the people of his day and leads us today to questions about the quality of our lives. My Father gives you the true bread from heaven, for the bread of God is that which comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. I am the bread of life. First, let us recall the event described in last week's gospel. People had been with Jesus for 3 days. They had exhausted the amount of food that they had with them. And so Jesus, knowing their hunger for food, responds to their physical hunger by feeding 5,000 men with bread, 5 loaves, and 2 fish. This miracle took place near the town of Tiberias. It's at the southwestern edge of the Sea of Galilee. And there are mountains there at Tiberias. Jesus had gone up the mountain alone. His disciples left during the night by boat. And they traveled from Tiberias to Capernaum, a city that is near the northern end of the Sea of Galilee. The Sea of Galilee is 13 miles long, 10 miles wide. Jesus came to them walking on the water. In today's gospel, the Gospel of John, we find Jesus teaching there in the synagogue of Capernaum. Jesus had been in that synagogue many times before. Jesus and his parents had always gone to synagogue. And Jesus sees a lot of people that he fed yesterday that have followed him. But he immediately tells them they're looking for him for the wrong reasons. There's not going to be a free lunch today. That is because the loaves that they ate, they were filled, they're hungry again, and they're looking for another free meal. Jesus reminds them of what happened in the desert after God had freed them from slavery in Egypt. The people had become angry at Moses. In the discourse in the synagogue that day, Jesus corrects their misunderstanding, and he reminds them, "It was not Moses that gave you bread. It was God, my Father, who gave you bread." He gave them bread from heaven, which at that time, not knowing what it was, the Hebrew people said, "Ma-na," what is it? Which later became known as manna. But God did this to test them, knowing that he was about to enter into a covenant with them and give them 10 commandments. He told them each morning, pick up only enough bread for that day and no more. Some followed God's command and some did not. Those who disobeyed, some of the bread that they picked up became infested later with worms. They took more than God wanted them to. The test would be the people, whether they obeyed God when he entered a covenant with them, when he gave them the 10 Commandments. A modern example of a test in our day, perhaps, would be the speed limit. The legal limit is meant for the safety of all. regardless of what the speed limit is, 95% of the drivers disobey and exceed the legal limit. Over 95% of them did that on my way out here today. Are some of us not unlike our ancestors who disobeyed the Ten Commandments, the law of God? But God had mercy on them in the desert and sent the people manna, bread from heaven. But most importantly, later, God sent his own Son from heaven. As Jesus told him that day, "My Father gives you the true bread from heaven," meaning himself. Jesus offered them and us true bread. "I am the living bread come down from heaven." In the first part of his teaching that day, Jesus invited them and us to be nourished by his way of life. He was speaking in a metaphorical way. He invites us to model our lives on his. We are to become like him in the manner in which we live our lives. When we digest our daily food, it becomes a part of us. When we digest Jesus' teaching and enter an intimate, personal relationship with him, it becomes our way of life. Then we learn to see as God sees and to live as Jesus, our God, invites us to live. And then Jesus begins to speak sacramentally. For in addition, Jesus gives us his flesh to eat and his blood to drink sacramentally. My flesh is real food and my blood real drink. Those standing around who heard him misunderstood. How can he do this? We're not cannibals. How could we eat his flesh? But our God is everywhere, and Jesus is God. And in every Eucharist, Jesus becomes present to each of us in the most intimate manner as he shares himself with us as the bread of life. I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never hunger, and whoever believes in me will never thirst. And like those who heard him that day, we say, Jesus, give us this bread always.